Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast, where we explore how slowing down, thinking deeper, and mastering those fundamental life skills for living a good life is actually the catalyst for long-term success. Today, we're joined by a remarkable guest who knows a thing or two about lasting value. Rob Heller, successful entrepreneur, youth development innovator, and the founder of the Boost program, a comprehensive personal development curriculum that's designed to equip teens and young adults with the life, social, and mental health skills that we honestly in education don't have time to teach anymore because we have so many other standards that we have to cover. So Rob knows there's a gap and he's offering a solution. After selling his insurance firm for 8 figures to a publicly held company, Rob witnessed firsthand the critical skill gaps plaguing today's youth in the corporate workplace. Combined with his desire to give his own children the tools they need to thrive, he did something extraordinary. He built a solution that didn't exist, drawing from a century of personal development, and distilling those teachings of legends like Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill into accessible, actionable lessons. Rob developed Boost as the missing course for today's youth. Today, he's a leading voice on how our phone-based culture has stunted interpersonal development and what parents, educators, and leaders can do to bridge that gap. If you've ever wondered how to help the next generation truly connect in a fast-paced world, then this conversation's for you. Let's dive in. All right. Well, Rob, thank you for agreeing to sit down with me on today's episode of the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast, and welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Kendra. It's really nice to catch up. I love the work that you're doing, so really happy to be a part of it.
I'm loving the work that you're doing too. So we're going to have a great conversation about how our two worlds connect. So can you just, for anybody out there listening or watching who doesn't really know your story, do you mind just kind of giving us a summary of your background and how you got into the work that you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So I have 3 kids, and my oldest, who's early 30s now, this is 20 years ago, was a teenager. And look, as parents, we all want our kids to do well academically and get good grades and go to a certain college. But we also know that at the end of the day, that there's certain skills that if they can develop these skills, they're just going to have a better chance for a good life. Really around the people skills and character and a mindset, that it really is skill based. And long story short, is coming into his teenage years, I went looking for a program to supplement the teachings of my wife and myself, realizing that teenagers can tend to tune us out. Even though they really are listening and observing, it feels like they're tuning us out. So I went looking for a third-party program to help reinforce the lessons that my wife and I were teaching. Couldn't find one. And being an entrepreneur, I had a lot of friends and family said, Rob, this is great. Why don't you just create your own program? So I did. It was called the Boost program. This was 20 years ago. It was well received. Long story short, to kind of fast forward, I got really busy in my normal business career, ended up selling my business, got into the world of the company that bought me. And the program just sat there. And about 3-4 years ago, as that career was winding down, I was like, you know what, these issues are even more important than they were 20 years, really because of the phone-based world. And I brought it back. So it's been a great ride, and really passionate about what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think, we were just chatting before I hit record about how things have probably shifted in the last few years more recently with AI becoming more accessible to everybody and people kind of jumping in to learn a little bit more about what tech and AI can do for you. But I think for this conversation, we want to talk more about teenage mindset. And I was most recently a middle school principal. I've been in the world of K-12 for 25 plus years. And you're a father, you're a grandfather. So you're seeing it through the eyes of not just an entrepreneur, but also as a parent and grandparent, thinking about the future of our kids. Are you hearing from the job force friends that teenagers coming in, when they get out of college, because they're still teenagers until they turn, I think, until their
Yes.
early 20s anyway. And even then, their brains are still growing. They're still kind
Yes.
of figuring out how they're going to be and who they're going to be in the real world. So, what are you hearing from your conversations with folks out in the entrepreneurial and real world?
Yeah, so really a lot of issues as it relates to this. So first off, as you know, Kendra, most employers, 85% of what they say they're looking for are quote unquote soft skills. They're like, we can teach someone the technical part of the job. We really want someone that can connect with people and be likable and have a mindset to when they're down to get back up. So it's really these soft skills that they're looking for. So that's really become a big part of what we've been focusing on. Our kind of target space is 14 to age 24. So in high school and workforce development programs, youth organizations, et cetera. So clearly the phone-based world and AI has just had a dramatic effect on everything as it relates to this. They're not developing the people skills the way that they need to because they're on the phone and texting instead of having conversation, more isolated. So it's really hurt them. But also mentally, it's really caused a big concern with the big thing, and we're spending a lot of time on this, that the phone is just an addiction. And when we do this, I say it myself, I feel the addiction, just the need to constantly pick it up. And we say the phone's controlling us as opposed to it controlling. So we really have been spending a lot of time for, again, remembering this is, starting at age 14. So there's a big movement now, as you well know, and I know you're going back into the elementary world, is under, let's say, 14 limiting screen times, not getting a cell phone, keeping them also, I feel like the movement's just starting, but it's really starting. I see it with my own daughter, with my grandkids. But my point is, okay, at some point, they're going to have a cell phone. So probably with unfiltered access. We're not going into a world with no cell phones at this point. So really, what's the conversation at that point? I think really they just need to understand these devices are designed to keep you on it. They're addicting. They're causing you to spend a lot of time not leaving feeling good. So it's really those conversations that we're having. And really what's interesting is the teenagers are recognizing it. They're coming into these sessions having some idea, but we really try and make it not another lecture from an adult, but just really trying to be on their side, helping them understand how it's hurting them and hurting their ability to be in the workforce.
Yes, because I think the workforce is probably where they're going to realize, probably for the first time, that they're going to be interacting with adults and that are in their age range, and then also multiple generations. I mean, you have at least four generations typically in a workforce. It might go to four, it might go to five, it might go to three. It just depends on your workspace. Google's definitely going to look a little different than maybe like an element, but yeah, and you've got to learn how to interact with different types of people too, not just age ranges. So, like little things that we just take for granted, like making eye contact, a good handshake, doing what you say you're going to do, like under promising and over delivering, like all of those things we've heard as adults. Our kids just don't understand what those mean. And
Don't
we're
they
going to have
really?
to
They
really teach
Yeah.
them more. Yeah.
Really teach and help develop. It can't be just one lecture or hearing at one time. So
No.
the Boost program has 26 separate skills, we say, within three buckets or three legs of the stool. So they're people skills. So there's 8 or 9 of those. You just mentioned a couple of them, to eye contact, smiling. We've spent a lot of time. It's not about you. It's about the other person. So listening and asking questions and not one-upping someone, and being prepared with some questions before they go into a situation, or remembering past conversations to develop those skills. And then certainly the character stuff, being honest and humble and kind and saying my bad. And then the third bucket is the mindset stuff. So being able to realize that when you're down, to get back up, a little bit of stress is okay, growth mindset, setting goals, things to reduce comp. And again, the phone has affected all of these. So I feel like in the last year or so, realizing the phone's affecting these 25 other skills of the 26. So we've really put a way bigger emphasis on the phone and the detrimental effects, because again, it really will affect them long term, just their whole life. I mean, certainly the career and their success, but just feeling good and getting things done and making, as you know, we're wired to connect with people, and these
Hmm.
devices are making it harder. So on many different levels.
Yeah. And I mean, there are some skills that I have to spend a lot of time on learning where, kids coming into the workforce are already going to know how to do because they're digital natives, so there is that. But I say probably 90, you and I would probably agree 90% of what they need to learn are the soft skills.
Again, every employer saying it doesn't matter if it's some sort of white collar setting. Even, I was at a trade school yesterday, and they were teaching HVAC, and these are young people looking to in their early 20s looking to get into the space. They need it. We actually had an air conditioning problem a week ago, and we had it was really my wife interviewed different vendors. It was the person that came out that connected with her and listened, ask questions. And it was kind of really cool what we did, and we do it in most sessions. We actually have heavy discussion, then we videotape them in a setting and then put it up on a TV and they see themselves. Because a lot of
Mhm.
people think they're doing okay, but until they actually see themselves on videotape, and we're not trying to make them feel bad, we put it up and we're in a room with other members of their peers and we talk about it. And it's really interesting. And they realize, hey, I can do better. And they actually typically right after we do it and they see themselves, let me do that again. And they do much better. So it's really much more than just, again, a lecture. It's really trying to develop these skills. Like anything else, you have to practice them. You can't, the only way they're going to get better is practice. And the good
Mhm.
news is that
That's so true.
anyone can do these things. Even if someone's an introvert and feels like, oh, I'm just not as comfortable, you don't have to be the class clown or the center of attention. You can learn these skills. I was an introvert younger, so again, I think it's really cool what we're doing. And the most important thing is the students are engaged. They really want to learn these skills because that was my biggest question coming back and when I kind of got back into the boost program and started going into high schools and they was these workforce development. They're going to be able to engage the next generation. And I have been, we have been able to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's almost like an athletic coach, I'm thinking football coach or soccer coach would, you know, review the tape with the players and then point out, like what you did here, circle, this is where you should have gone, or tell me more about what you guys think. Like, it didn't work. This play is awful. What are we going to do differently? I mean, essentially what you're doing.
That's exactly it. It's a great analogy, and I use that all the time. This was actually young men, and I said it's like them coming to the sideline and looking at the iPad and having a conversation or
Mhm.
looking at the tape. Same thing with an entertainer. Typically, they're looking at their tape or what they could do differently. So they don't love it at the beginning. They obviously hesitate, but once they do it, they really enjoy it and they learn from it. So that's a great analogy about the athlete,
Yeah. And it's all
100%.
in the way that you approach it. If you're doing it from a space that's safe, and you're showing them we're all learning from this, and you give them a heads up that it's going to happen, then they're going to be more comfortable about it. I say that with teachers. If you're willing for me to come in and do a video of your lesson in a classroom, and then we're going to break it down later, one, I'm coming in, two, it's just for you, it's not for anybody else, no one else is going to see it unless you want to share it with colleagues or something. So yeah, and it's all in how you approach it, but that's coaching, and that's in any sense, sports or job related. So that's great. So knowing that you're providing this opportunity for young, college age, high school, college age folks to get out there and practice their soft skills, are you seeing any kind of, transformation when they try it out on their own? Do they come back to you? Do they give you feedback? Like, what's that look like for you guys?
Yeah, they really do. So we're in a bunch of high schools, and sometimes it's an 8-week program that rotates. And the students that came before always come back to our class and want to hang out and say and want to show the greeting process with me or talk about it or any of our other boost coaches. And you can tell they're excited to share, and that's when it gets fun. Is when you can see they're really learning and getting better at these things. It's certainly not overnight and it's not an 8-week program or something isn't going to completely change. But at least if they know that life is skill based and here's the ones and some of them I'm actually good at and I'm leaning into. And really what it does, we actually talked about this just even yesterday, is to then be aware of it so when they're out in the world, when they're dealing with other people, they can see what's working with other people and what's not. So if they don't even understand how this stuff works, then it's hard. But if they understand it, they're going to see, why do I like this person? Why does this person, maybe I'm a little bit more uncomfortable? Why am I connecting with someone? And they start seeing these little things. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it could get young people and, newly hired individuals as well to be thinking about what's my relationship with my, current employer, my future employer going to look like? Because you want to start, you've seen these books out there talking about the first 90 days. You've got to get to know your organization. You've got to get to know either your school, if you're a student, get to know your teachers, get to know your classmates, and figure out the classroom and the way it works so you can get good grades. But also, when you're in the workforce, you've got to figure that out. You've got to figure out the lay of the land and who has the power in the building or on the floor or in which office, and who you need to have a lot of face time with, who you need to collaborate with. I mean, it's all those soft skills like you talked about. You've got to think about it in those first 90 days. Those first 3 months are so critical in how you set yourself up for success. Do you talk a little bit more about maybe like like a I don't know, like an entry plan and then like the first so many months or years and then like long-term planning? Or are you guys more like we're doing soft skills first and then we're going to kind of see where it goes from here?
So it's actually really, that's a great question. So when you talk about, if you look up soft skills, so you go into any AI whatever you want to do to look up soft skills, you always get like 10, and it's leadership, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, time management. So you get like the same 10. What's interesting, the reason that these skills aren't soft and hard, they're actually hard, is because those skills are made up of multiple smaller skills. So leadership, for example, is the ability to listen and ask a question, being empathetic, being honest, being humble. So you really need these other mini skills. So really what Boost is doing is almost teaching one-on-one skills. It's teaching all the basic ones. So my idea, we're just starting this process with schools that have done kind of the Boost program, is then in the next year. So let's say ninth grade, they're going through the one-on-one skills. And then in 10th grade, they'll do the more complicated, the ones that we know, like leadership, but they'll have the basics. Because again, in the corporate world, I ended up selling my business to a big publicly held company. And actually, what's interesting, I spent my last couple of years going around the country teaching these skills to that generation. They'd fly me around to different offices. But I was in many leadership training programs, and I'm thinking to myself, the person next to me, they don't know how to listen, and they're not listening to you. They're trying to one up you and everything. So how are they ever going to be a leader? So again, I think that many adults could use some basic training, so to speak, in some of
Hmm.
this stuff. So
Yeah,
that's really what we're trying to do, is kind of build the foundation for someone.
gotcha. Yeah, I likened it a little bit to what your curriculum sounds like, probably what Chick-fil-A employees, entry employees go through. Because, I've always kind of thought if they could come in and train my staff on how to work with parents, I think that would be great. So just the same
That's it.
idea of like,
Yeah.
you know, just making sure
Yeah.
you're
No,
out there,
you're
you're
right.
problem solving.
Yeah, there are a couple of organizations that just drill it into you and do it. Chick-fil-A is clearly one of them. So it is so true, and it's consistent across the board.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. That's what you're trying to do, is get that consistency. And I do think that,
Right.
let me, if I can ask you a question, the world of schools is obviously changing, and as time goes on, there's going to be more competition because there's more choices. And I think schools themselves need to dedicate more time and effort, because as a parent, I want my child to go to the school that, look, you love them to do well academically, and that's
Hmm.
important. I get that. But you really want these skills. In fact, I have a book out there that's called The Missing Course for Today's Youth. I'm saying we're teaching math and science and history, all important. I'm a big believer in education and learning and being curious, etc. But again, why isn't there more courses dedicated to this within schools? And that's really kind of one of my main thought processes.
Yeah, and it is an interesting question because over the years we've had character education courses, and typically that falls on the school counselor
Yeah.
or, the kindergarten teachers, depending on the elementary, middle, or high school setting, or in high school, it's the athletic coaches are continuing to show and model and teach and reinforce. So there hasn't, I can't say, I mean, maybe and in my school systems in Virginia and Tennessee, that there has been a consistent character ed course that has been something that aligns with the values and
Yeah,
beliefs of a school system, because you've got that.
yeah.
You've got different regions of the United States, just like anywhere else, that are going to have different beliefs and values. But I think bottom line, we all believe in these soft skills. We all know that they're important. And so trying to find a way to get them out there and taught consistently has definitely been a heavy lift for school systems, definitely public schools. I'd say I grew up in a Catholic school environment. It's a little different. I had Roman Catholic nuns that
Yeah,
were
there you go.
providing a
Yeah,
lot of the character education, a
yeah,
little
yeah,
different. But you also, for the most part, you would also have high parent engagement in those settings. So you're going to have the parent engagement, you have the teacher engagement, depending on their beliefs and values and how deep they go. And then, it's up to the students to perform and norm into that. So Catholic school is a totally different world, or Christian, schools,
yeah, yes,
private schools. But
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
motivation is still there, right? Because everybody is looking to eventually graduate and get either a job right away or go to college. And, that path is going to be individual. But at the same time, if you want to succeed in one of those two arenas, you've got to have those soft skills. So I know schools can do a better job. And I think school systems, usually like in Tennessee, it's a state adoption. What they'll do is they'll go through the process of figuring out which curriculums they approve. And then the schools in that state get a choice and they work with teacher committees and they come up with the whole adoption selection process. So it's very structured in Tennessee. In Virginia, it depended on the division. It depended on you know, the schools, really. I felt like it was more character ed was kind of whatever you can fit in, wherever you can make it work, it works. So I think every state's different, and that's just the United States. I don't know what it looks like around the world. I think that, places in, for sure, UK look very different than, what is it, Singapore, where you
yeah,
can't
oh,
like
yeah,
even
yeah,
do anything or you're going to go to
yeah,
jail. So it's
yeah,
probably
yeah.
very different in different countries.
Yeah, no, no, there's no question, and there's a wide range. And look, I understand schools are
Yeah.
challenged. You have to, academically and standardized testing, and kids today and parents that like that. There are so many challenges from a school perspective, and I
Hmm.
get it. So I don't mean to say, oh, why don't you just add this course? It's not that easy.
But yeah,
But at the end of the day, if these skills are so important, it really it just makes sense to me to figure
they should
something
be.
out.
They should
Yeah.
be part of the curriculum and it
It
should be
should be taught, yeah,
consistent. I agree.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yep.
and really the stuff
Yeah.
we're talking about is not controversial. It's again, connecting with people, having
Yeah.
character,
No.
mindset, bones. It's really not controversial.
Hmm.
So I'm kinda of the
Yeah.
opinion that and within Boost, we say this could be done an hour a week if it was just separate. So again, I feel like
Hmm.
most places, could fit an hour a week somehow into the schedule where however they
Yeah.
end up doing that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if it is marketed, thinking about from a marketing perspective, if it's marketed as a job skill 101, getting you ready, preparing you for high school, preparing you for college, preparing you for the workforce, I think it's going to be more received by parents and communities across definitely the US, because that's what they want. They want to see successful students and all the others. Social emotional, for some reason, social emotional curriculum became a big hot
Yes.
ticket
Yes. Yeah,
point
yeah,
that
yep,
was very
yeah,
controversial. So as long as like the social emotional piece is like pushed to the side,
yes.
depending on your group,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
audience, and it's just focusing on job skills and social, not social skills, we can't say that, but
Soft
you know
skills, yeah. I mean, that's really
emotional
yeah, I mean, I've
intelligence.
yeah, emotional intelligence, yeah,
Hmm.
and that's really yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what it is, and it's basic stuff.
Yeah.
So I've been challenged in the sense that I know how important these skills are, but again, what's the language I use? Because I don't have a background in education, so I
Yeah.
do know the term social emotional learning in certain settings.
Mhm.
So really,
Mhm.
really, I've kind of turned it into soft skills. And what we're going to actually be interested in, this is really as much a question for you. So one of the things I realized is that, is that you have all these, I'll call them organizations. So every type of school, public, private, charter, religious
Yes.
schools, homeschooling. Then again, these workforce development programs. So again, let's say anyone dealing with
Mhm.
today's youth from 14 to 24.
Mhm.
So I feel like they all want to teach these skills. Every adult, this is one thing every adult, when you really start talking about these skills, every adult
Mhm.
agrees it's the one thing I think every adult agrees on, but yet it's hard. They're doing it overall. They care about. They got into this field because they care so much about kids and want to do it, and are really changing lives in a lot of ways. But yet they're left feeling like knowing that they're not doing everything that's possible in this world that we live in to teach these skills. Because again, where we're
Right.
at, but yet they don't have the
Mhm.
resources or the budget to do it. So my main point is we're creating a community for anyone in this space that wants to develop these skills, where there'll be a ton of resources for them to go out and teach it. And then we can also share best practices and best ideas.
Mhm.
Because again, it's really very similar for every organization, the skills and how to actually teach them. So that's really
Yeah, and
where I kind of ended up. Yeah.
that would be, I think, so useful because I'm thinking back to like my childhood. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, maybe a church, Sunday school. I mean, those were the places where if you heard it at home, then you heard it again in those environments, the golden rule, do unto others, and it could be as religious or non-religious. It's still going to be focusing in on what you're talking about. It's just people skills. It's soft skills, and it's how to treat each other well and how to succeed in life. And if it can be consistent, I think that would be amazing because all these organizations could use it, the scouts
Yeah. And
and
they can make it
churches
and
and
make it,
schools.
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the
Yeah.
key, and they can kinda make it their
Hmm.
own, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, this ties into every major religion,
Yeah.
and which makes sense, and they
Absolutely.
can again tie their historical religious aspect to it, but it's
Yeah.
all, again, basic skills, and again, this would
Hmm.
allow every organization and every leader, and person teaching these not to have to recreate the wheel
Yeah.
and spend a ton of money, so that's really what we're headed. We're just setting up
Ton of
this
money and
community
time.
for people
Yeah.
to do it.
And I
Yeah.
think that's probably why it's been so inconsistent because in my experience, there hasn't been a curriculum that's been like, oh, yeah, you want to use this. It's a
Yes.
gap.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
gap in the
It's a
market for
gap, yeah,
sure.
and
Hmm.
especially for older ones. I know there are a lot of social emotional character for elementary and into middle school, but how do you take the teenager, the 14, 15, 17-year-old and make it applicable to them where they
Yes.
wanna do it and where they're engaged? That's really the key. So I feel like we've really, we're always improving, so we haven't completely
Hmm.
figured it out, but I feel like we've made major progress in engaging them
Yes.
to wanna learn these skills, so and a lot
Oh,
of it is just for them to realize how skill-based life is. You usually start with and say, "Okay, you're 15 now, 10 years from now, you're 25. What's your life look like?" And we did it again yesterday, put it up on the board. And they always start with the material stuff. I want the car, I want the mansion, they always go to but then they start saying, "I want a family, I wanna be respected in the community, I want these things." Like, you can have all this, you just need to
hmm,
learn these skills, and that really draws them in to wanna learn more. And then on top of it, in an AI world, they know, like, these skills are more important than ever because,
yes.
again, it's to succeed and thrive in life and have the connections, you have to have these skills. So they get that.
Yes. Yes. You got to bust down those firewalls in HR to get that resume seen by somebody. And then you got to get an interview. And then you got to know how to navigate an interview. Then once you get the job, you got to know how to navigate the job force and what that landscape
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point back to the interview, to get the interview, usually it's not the resume in HR, it's knowing someone. So you have to
Yeah.
know how to connect with people and network and do those kinds of things and be someone that someone wants to refer you into a place. So, yeah,
Right.
we do a
Yeah.
lot on the interview
Absolutely.
process. How we again, even in an interview, don't sit back and just wait to be interviewed. You come prepared to interview them with questions and
Hmm.
thoughts and walk into the interview right away and you see they have kids on the desk. Tell me about your kids, or they like a certain sports team or went to a certain college. Like, you do that right out again, because that's what I've interviewed and hired literally hundreds of people. Fortunately, had to let people go, and it was always based upon these skills. It wasn't their resume, what their GPA. I'd barely look at the resume. It was really all these other skills that would cause me to say, "Oh,
Right.
I like them." I could see them being on the team as opposed to their GPA or what they got in 12th
Yes.
grade algebra. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. Even more so now because with AI coming into play, there's going to be a lot more kids, unfortunately, like literally phoning it in with their papers and projects if teachers aren't really keen on how to spot a fake, spot AI, understand that that's not student generated work. And the best way to do that is to get them to do their presentations in front of the
do their
class. So
presentation. Yes,
get them started
yeah,
presenting their information in front of an audience, and that leads right into that interview process. If they know
mhm,
how to present, then they can do an
yeah.
interview pretty well. They just have to understand who they're interviewing for, like who's
Yes,
the
and
audience.
think through, that's a great point, absolutely, yeah. I remember this and again, this is 20 years ago, I used to tell when my kids were in college, I guess it wasn't quite 20 years ago when they were actually in college, but I'd say, they'd tell me about their class, I go, "Tell me about your public speaking class," like that, just again, knowing that how important these skills are, so it's so true.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm also thinking there's got to be a little comedy with this too, or some pop culture, because I can think of Seinfeld episodes about one uppers and close talkers and all of those. It's just, you've got to understand there's all different types of people in the world, and you got to
Yeah.
know how to handle them and pivot. And I can think of a few Friends episodes too. I mean, just thinking about all those shows out there. But, I know kids going into the workforce these days may or may not know those shows. So
Yeah.
just
So,
thinking
no, we
about
do, and luckily
that's
enough, again, we have some Boots Coasters that are closer to that, and they have all the analogies and in the current movies and,
yeah,
entertainers that they
and
do,
that's
and they'll
good.
do a little clip. So you have to have that to get the connection, yes.
Yeah, yeah, to relate. Yes, for sure. Okay. Well, is there any place else that you want to kind of jump into as far as like thinking about ways that parents might be able to support their kids at home, with that positive mindset? We know that too much screen time can really mess with your head and your motivation. So, what would be, besides making sure that screen time is limited, as much outdoor play as possible, getting kids to interact with you at dinner time or having those conversations, what else could parents be thinking about?
So I think it's actually a skill that my mom helped me develop when I was younger, and I think it's really important. And that's the skill before they're in a setting to think through some questions that they can ask. So we would go visit, a cousin, and in the car ride over, she'd say, "We're going to see the cousin, and they're going through this or going to this school or something's happening with my aunt," whatever it was. She would prepare me what was going on in the life of this other person. So when I walked into it, I would have some questions and it really developed that skill. So right now, before I go into any setting, I think through who I'm going to see, what were past conversations, and now my own kids do that. Again, they've developed that skill. They're like, "Oh, tell me before we're in a setting, what's going on with them," so they can again kind of jump right into it. It just again forms that connections, and you just say like, "I really like them." We all know people like to talk about themselves and feel comfortable when someone seems to be interested in them. We basically in Boost say turn the lights off on you and put the lights on someone else. And that is a skill I think parents can start developing early on with their kids to start to just getting that mentality.
Yes, it does. And it gets them, thinking about more than, like you said, themselves, but also about, the fact that they have a connection with this person that either they haven't met before, like they haven't seen in a long time. And that way you kind of bridge that awkward, hi, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while. You can jump right in with, tell me more about what's going on with you. And that just breaks the
Yeah.
ice and you just
It
jump
just
right
breaks
in.
yes, and it just yeah, it just forms that connection. It's just so simple. And again, anyone can do it. It's really easy to do. You just have to practice and do it a little bit. And then and then obviously that needs to be done authentically. You're not doing it just to do it, but you just see how that draws someone closer. So I think
Yeah.
that's a big one. Also, another one is that parents can is really understanding nonverbal communication.
Hmm.
There's all kinds of statistics, but, the one I think of most is it's 70% of communication. So their body language, their tone of voice, their facial expression, their hand placement, all those little things. So really trying to have someone become more of a student of nonverbal communication to really read what is that person really thinking or saying. So we spent a lot of time on that boost. And again, I think that's something that parents can help their children develop.
Yes, those are always great things to be
Yeah,
thinking about, especially when
yeah,
you're in a meeting setting or maybe you're at a family reunion and there's a lot of people in the space. Just be mindful of yourself, and also others in the room. Yeah,
yeah. So important.
definitely
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, the last thing is that on one hand, I was saying at the beginning that I did this because I felt like my son was tuning me out as a teenager, and but they're also always watching. So really, just you really have to be that role model, which I know most parents are, and they're conscious of that. But every single setting. So when you're in the checkout line at the supermarket, to be extra nice to the person and holding the door, all those little things, they really are watching you. I think it's really important to keep that in mind because sometimes as parents, we know it becomes difficult to keep up that, all the time.
Yes, it does. And my little ones, my boys are 11 and they're realizing probably in the last couple of years that, people take notice when you hold the door for them at a
Yeah,
restaurant. And
yeah.
when you say please and thank you to the wait staff or whomever you interact with, that goes a long way. So,
It's so true. And what we teach in Boost is that, look, those things are important and it's the right thing to do, but they make you feel better. Like we spend a
mhm,
lot of time on that. These things make you feel better. And that's again how we, have the ability to engage, particularly teenagers in it. Wow, once they start realizing it, that they really do feel
mhm.
better.
Yeah, just being able to get somebody to smile. Hopefully that, kids, I think the dopamine, I guess it's the dopamine that we get from these, right? And so you get that from somebody smiling that you've made their day is so much
So
more fulfilling than a phone.
it's so true. So we actually, not to get into a whole science thing, but we spent a lot of time on what's called dose. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And this isn't something I felt like my kids, again, even 15, 20 years ago had to focus on. But in the phone-based world, this next group, it needs to understand this, that there's certain chemicals in our body that make us feel good, other ones don't. And you need to start stacking the good ones together and connecting with people and smiling and greeting people and light touch and having character and being humble and kind. Like these things make you feel good. And so we got to again start stacking. And again, the phone's getting in the way of that, So we really spent a lot of time on this dose and these chemicals and how you really have to be aware of these. And again, that's another one when they start thinking about it, then again it gets them engaged in what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. So, if there are any school systems out there or other organizations, churches, civic organizations, that want to learn more about how to get a hold of your program to purchase it or find out more information, where can they find that?
Yeah. So I think the best thing is go to boostprogram.com. There's a lot of information on there. If someone's we're really just starting this community right now, because I think that's going to be the best place. Because again, we do have the ability to bring in Boost coaches, but really, I think the best thing is going to be for an organization to become part of this community. It's soft skills for today's youth, and there's a whole program around. So I think if you go to boostprogram.com or just email me directly if you're interested, rheller at Boost Program, and say, hey, and I'm interested in joining that community or learning more about the community, because it's not going to be expensive. It's going to be, under $1,000 for a whole school to join. And yet there's going to be a ton of resources and connections to make, because that's really what at the end of the day is going to be the best thing. And they can trade ideas, they can get into small groups. And again, we'll have a lot of resources how we do different things. Yeah.
That's great. It's a great
Yeah.
resource. I appreciate you, creating that and putting that out into the world. Do you, thinking about our conversation, we kind of started off with, where we think youth is going these days with phone interruptions and learning soft skills. But, you know, I think that kids are definitely resilient. They're going to improve the world that we're in. I know they're going to make it better for everybody in the coming generation, but any final thoughts that you want to share as far
So,
as this
so let's,
program?
yeah,
And
I want to piggyback on that. I think that's actually a really good point because again, haven't, historically wasn't in education last couple of years. And all I heard is kind of the horror stories about today's youth. And it made me again cautious, gave me pause to, do I really want to do this? Am I qualified? And I've really found the exact opposite. Kids, they weren't born differently. They're still good kids. They want to do well. That's really the key because again, the world they live in, we need to really double down on these skills to help the next generation. But so many people, particularly in the business world, just want to write off this generation, just say, can't do it, too soft. And that's just not the right thing. We need as adults to double down because they are the future, which I know you believe in because you're in education and you have those triplets.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And they need to definitely prove everybody wrong when they get older. This generation is going to do amazing things that we've never done before. So just like our, generations before us. So, we just have to support them and make sure they have the skills they need before they
Yeah.
get out there.
Yeah, and that's part of what we also do is challenge them, guys. This older generation is saying you can't do it. Like that's not the case. And that kind of gives them
Hmm.
additional incentive. So I agree with everything that you're saying, 100%. Yeah,
Well, Rob, this has been a fun conversation. It gives me, the motivation and hope that, we can do this. We just have to think, carefully about how we're modeling as a
yeah,
parent, an
yeah,
educator, and a future employer.
yes, absolutely, so true. But thank you for having me, Kendra. And again, keep up the great work. And take care of those boys.
Yes, and have fun out at the beach with your granddaughter.
I hear her in the background. She's ready. Take care. Yeah.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. And my conversation with Rob Heller was definitely a reminder for when it comes to developing those real human skills. Sometimes we have to slow down. We have to slow that pace to build a foundation that lasts. To learn more about Rob and the Boost program and how you can help bridge the critical skill gap for the young people in your life, check out the links in our show notes. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend and or parent who needs to hear it too. And as always, the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.